Hello there and welcome to this video on the Daystate Wolverine. In this video we're going to be covering a full disassembly of the rifle as well as giving you any information you need to know as we walk through the process. Before we get started though, on your screen now you should see a complete list of all the tools that we're going to need to do this disassembly. It includes all the Allen key sizes as well as spanner sizes as well as any Daystate specific tooling. With that out of the way, the last thing I will mention is that this rifle is the Wolverine R, which is the regulated version, and it is fitted with a bottle, although the information in this guide here should be applicable to both the unregulated version and also the cylinder version. Another thing that I want to mention is that if you plan on disassembling or servicing the regulator, make sure you note down the reg pressure before you degas the rifle. With that all out of the way, we can begin. The first thing we're going to do is remove the stock. And to do that, we're simply going to remove this bolt here using a 5mm Allen key. With the bolt loosened, the stock can be lifted and pulled off. As you take the stock off, you do have to move the action forward slightly in order to miss this little step here. The next thing we're going to do is degas the rifle. And to do that, what we're going to be using is the Daystate degassing tool, this tool here. To use the tool, what I like to do is unscrew the end, so that this piece comes off here. We can then clip that onto the Foster fitting that's fitted to the bottom of the rifle, and then screw in our little T-handle piece here. Now my rifle is already degassed. I degassed it off camera just to save a little time. But as you go in with the T-handled piece, you should feel it contact with the bottom of the one-way valve fitted to the rifle, and then air should start to pour out the bottom. Once the hissing has stopped and the rifle is fully degassed, we can simply remove the tool like so, and then continue on with the disassembly. Now, as this is a regulated gun, we have to check that both reservoirs of air are fully depleted. Now we can do that by a check on the side. We see this one here is the bottle pressure gauge, and this one here is the reg pressure gauge. If this was still reading reg pressure at the moment, there's a couple things we could do to relieve that. We could either, number one, dry fire the rifle in a nice safe direction until the gauge reads 0, or we could simply crack the gauge loose slightly and then depressurize it that way. But to make the rifle 100% safe to work on, what I like to do is remove both gauges before we continue on with the work. To do that, we're just going to be using a 22mm spanner, cracking the gauges loose and then removing them by hand. With both gauges removed, there's nowhere for the air to hide, so the rifle is 100% safe to work on. To make the rifle a little easier to handle for the camera, the next thing we're going to remove is the barrel and shroud. The first thing to do is to remove the shroud by just gripping it and then loosening it. There we have the outer aluminium tube. Next up, we can remove the shroud carrier on the front. That's simply done by using a 2mm Allen key, loosening these two grub screws here. Next thing we can do is remove the barrel by loosening these two screws here using a 2.5mm Allen key. These don't need to be done out all the way, just a couple turns and the barrel should be able to be pulled free. Like so. The last thing we can remove from the shroud is this little back boss here. That's simply done by removing these grub screws here. And again, that's done by using a 2mm Allen key. There we have it. The last thing I want to make you aware of before we put the barrel away is that the barrel can be removed with the shroud intact, and that allows you to gain access to these 3 O-rings here, 2 on the outside and then the breech seal on the inside. The next thing we'll do is remove the bottle. That's simply done by gripping the action and then twisting the bottle off. Now these can be quite tight from the factory, so they may take a little bit of effort to get loose. With that done, we'll start work on this front assembly here. Next thing we'll do is remove the one-way Foster fitting fitted to the bottom here. That's done by simply using a 5/8 ring spanner, coming through on the bottom there and just cracking it loose. There we have it. There's the Foster fitting, and then the one-way plunger is still fitted to the rifle, so we'll remove that using some tweezers. With that removed, the last thing to take out is the small brass cup that's in the bottom of this hole here. We're going to get that out by simply tipping the action up and tapping it out. And there we have all the components for the one-way valve and Foster fitting. Next thing we'll do is separate the front block from the main block of the rifle. Now on these Wolverines there is a 3-pin anti-tamper screw in the base here that needs to be removed using the corresponding tool. So I've got my one here, and that just simply fits into the holes. It has the correct pin spacing, so that goes in the base there. Then the screw itself can be loosened by the use of a small spanner. Once it's loose, the screw can be removed by hand. And there we have the 3-pin screw removed with the locking plate on the back. Now I will mention that if you did not have the 3-pin tool on hand, you could also use a pair of snap ring pliers. Alternatively, you could also just use a pair of pliers or parrot grips to grip the head of the screw and loosen it. Then the other 3 can be just loosened with a 4mm Allen key. Next off, the front block can just be wiggled loose from the main block, although being nice and careful as there is the valve spring in the base there. So you can see the valve spring just poking out there. We'll tip that out now so it doesn't get lost. And then we do have this small plastic housing which goes around the valve spring as well. Whilst we're here, we will also take out the valve and the valve seats just so they don't get lost. It's done by simply using a set of tweezers to remove the valve, and then hooking the valve seat loose with the same set of tweezers. Then that can be knocked out the front. So there's our valve seat. Next up, we'll bring the front block back and remove this little cap here. That's simply done by using a shaft of some description. This is an old Allen key. We'll unscrew this, and then we can tap out the small restrictor there. The last thing we'll remove is the regulator, and I'm going to remove that by using some parrot grips, gripping the housing lightly and then twisting. They're not normally done up tight, so just once you get them loose, you should be able to do the rest by hand. There we have it. So that's the front block fully disassembled. There's all the components of it there, so we'll concentrate on the regulator now. Before we take apart the regulator though, we are just going to take a quick measurement of this little piece here. So we're coming in with some digital calipers and just measuring the distance between the adjuster screw and the top of this housing here. What this will allow us to do is reset the reg pressure when we go to reassemble the rifle. With that done though, we'll take the regulator and by using a 22mm spanner, come across the flats, and then using the set of parrot grips we used earlier, we'll loosen this top cap here. With that loose, we can use a bolt in the back of the reg piston to pull it out. The bolt is the same size that's fitted to the front, or that keeps the front block onto the main block of the rifle. And we'll pull the regulator out there, making sure not to lose any of the Belleville washers. So that's the reg piston removed from the rifle. The last thing we'll do is tap out the small white sealing disc, and then we can remove the adjuster screw by using a nice flat bladed screwdriver. Once it's all the way unscrewed, just grip the adjuster screw lightly and pull it out nice and carefully from the top. And there we have the regulator fully disassembled. With that done, the next thing we'll do is bring back the main block and continue on with the disassembly. The first thing we'll remove is the trigger. To do that, what we need to do is flip the rifle up and remove these 4 bolts in the bottom. Before we do that though, we will just check that the rifle is not cocked. With that done, we'll remove the 4 bolts using a 2mm Allen key. With the screws loosened and removed, we can now remove the trigger assembly, being nice and careful not to lose this little spring that's present in the bottom. It is loose, so just be careful that that doesn't get lost. We can disassemble the trigger unit a little further by removing this plastic outer housing. That's simply done by removing the 2 screws in the unit, one at the front, one at the back, and that's done by using a flat-bladed screwdriver. And there we have it. Next thing we'll do is remove the safety unit from the back of the rifle. Now this is fitted with one of these 3-pin anti-tamper screws in the base there, which needs to be removed using the Daystate 3-pin anti-tamper tool. And this is it here. What I've done is just put it in a screwdriver end so it's a little easier to hold. To use it, all we need to do is line the pins up with the holes on the screw. Make sure it's seated nice and firmly, and then simply loosen the screw. Once the screw is loose, we can just take it out by hand. And there we have it there. On some rifles, the anti-tamper is fitted to both sides, but on this rifle, it's just fitted on one side. The other side, however, is just fitted with a standard Allen-headed bolt. So to remove that, we're just going to use a 2mm Allen key. And as we do so, just put in a small amount of pressure on the safety unit from the back there, as the hammer spring is always trying to push it off. So with that removed, we can then push it in slightly, pull this pin down, and the safety should come out the back. There we have it. Now there are a few things that have come out so far. So here we have the hammer spring and the anti-rattle guides. The next thing is this ball bearing here. Finally we have the safety unit itself with the small spring and ball bearing in the top. So just make sure that they don't get lost. With that out, we can bring the block back and gently peel up this sticker here. Now it doesn't need to be peeled off all entirely, we just need to get one corner up, then tip the hammer back to expose this screw in the back. Then by using a 2.5mm Allen key, you can simply remove the screw like so, then tip the hammer out the back of the rifle. So here we have the hammer, this unit here. We will disassemble the hammer just so you can see how it works, although it's likely that you're probably never going to need to touch it. The first thing we'll do is remove this bolt here. This is a locking screw which locks the hammer spring adjustment. Here we have it there. Next thing we'll do is take a M4 bolt, screw it lightly into where we just took that grub screw out of, loosen it so that it's loose, and then by using a 3mm Allen key, we'll come through the back here. And whilst turning the Allen key clockwise, we'll wind the grub screw out the front of the hammer assembly. With that done, to separate the two halves of the hammer, we'll screw this bolt in a little more, just to make sure it's all the way through. And then, by using a nice flat-bladed screwdriver, we'll come in the back here and loosen this part. Now, I will mention that this has been pre-loosened for the camera. The ones from the factory are normally Loctited in so that you can't remove them. They never really need to come out under normal servicing conditions. We're just taking it apart so you can see what's going on. There we have it. So there's the hammer, or two parts of the hammer. And they go together like so within the outer shuttle. So the two halves of the hammer are screwed together through the outer housing. With that done, there's just a few more things we can remove from the block itself. The first is the cocking arm and pellet probe. So first thing we'll do is remove the single shot loader, and then flip the block up and locate the cocking dog, which is in the base there. By using a 2.5mm Allen key, we'll get on that screw and remove it from the pellet probe. And there we have it there. The next thing we can do is flip the rifle up and remove this screw in the back, and this will allow us to remove the cocking arm and pellet probe entirely. So here we have the pellet probe and cocking arm assembly. We can push this little bush out, and then if we wanted to, we could remove the cocking arm from the pellet probe itself by loosening these two screws here. And after removing a bit of the excess grease, you can see the screws more clearly. So what we'll do is put a small amount of pressure on this little arm here as we undo this screw. And we're undoing it obviously by using a very small flat bladed screwdriver. Now this is spring loaded, so as you remove the screw it is going to want to ping out. But there we have the pellet probe, and if we look in the base there we can see a ball bearing that we can tap out. We'll remove it with a set of tweezers there. With the ball removed, there's still a spring in the base there, which again we'll hook out with just some tweezers. So they're in two bits there. We could remove the cocking handle if we wanted to by just removing this screw, but I'll leave it on as it's a very simple piece to remove if you needed to do so. We can do the same with the pellet probe itself by removing this small screw here. We can then remove this arm and the pellet probe is fully disassembled. This one, or this piece I should say, doesn't have a spring and a ball behind it, so you don't need to worry about that as you disassemble it. With that done, next thing we'll do is remove the cover plate from the other side of the rifle. That's done by using a 2mm Allen key. Those two screws removed, we can slide this piece out. Now when you take these screws out, you don't remove them entirely, you simply loosen them sort of a quarter of a turn or so just so that they're loose, then slide this piece out. The last thing we can remove from the rifle is the valve itself. So to do that we're going to loosen this stock bolt attachment off using a 11mm spanner. With that removed, we can remove this bolt in the bottom here using a 3mm Allen key. Then if we come in from the top, we can remove these two bolts by using a 2mm Allen key. This does have the indexing pin beneath it, so it is spring loaded. So as you take this second screw out, just be careful that it doesn't ping off. And then with the screw removed, we can allow the top plate off. Then we have the spring, which is this piece here, the indexing pin, and on my rifle it all came out as one piece, but we have the indexing pin, the small O-ring in the base, and the sleeve that the pin runs in. So all of those components there. With that done, we can come back in from this side, and by using a long Allen key or something similar, you can come in and just very gently push the valve out. There we have it. So there's the valve removed from the rifle. With that all said and done, that's pretty much going to do it for this video. The rifle has been fully disassembled straight down into individual components, and everything that can be removed from the rifle has been removed. We hope you found this video useful. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.